Well, ladies and gentlemen, today's the day marks today's celebration for the release of Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door Switch Remake, and I'm sure we'll explain more about that if we somehow get this video started. So, hey, what is up, ladies and gentlemen? It is I am the one and only Tiana here once again, and I am back for the likes of the Mexi Toys videos. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for some more of Let's Play of Princess Peach Showtime for the Nintendo Switch. So, last time, we've essentially almost completely done everything for the sake of the forms of the second floor, minus about the fact that, again, we'll save the boss challenges for last, and as a result, we did somehow once again manage able to find some more ninja people, and on top of that, we also did manage able to collect certain remaining sparkle gems in journey forms of it, not only for the sake of the forms of Act 1, for the sake of the forms of Dashing Thief Peach, and on top of that, there's also one for the sake of the forms of Figure Skater Peach as well. So yeah, that's all there is to really think about it. So anyway, today for this video is about the fact that we're going to be continue doing the forms of the Hide and Seek challenge, except this time we're about to jump right into Floor 3. So no matter what though, and also same applies with the forms of trying to obtain some more sparkle gems here and there, just in case we can able to actually collect more, so just in case we can able to buy some more decorations for the sake of the forms of certain floors. Like, we already know for a fact that we've already obtained every single decorations for the sake of the forms of not only in Floor 1, as well as Floor 2, so all needs left now is just Floor 3, Floor 4, and as well as Floor 5, but I highly doubt I don't know if I can able to actually get the rest of the remainings of the forms of those decorations in Floor 5 personally though. Well, that's just because no matter what though, as I said before, we'll save the boss challenges for last, so just to ensure for the fact that not only we can able to get the majority of the decorations for Floor 5, and maybe one of them from Floor 4, but we shall see. So anyway, so a few things I want to talk about is about the fact that, well, today's date is of course the 23rd of May today, in some cases in 2024 today. And as I mentioned this before, well, today's the day folks, and that today marks the forms of the game's release of Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door Switch Remake has finally gets released today. So no matter what though, it's about the fact that what if I have managed able to obtain a game at long last, and I gotta say, I was super impressed about the fact that I can finally get a chance to play that particular, you know, the best Paper Mario games of all time again, except this time on a different system, specifically the Nintendo Switch. And for my opinions of that particular version of the game compared to the original GameCube Classic, I will say though, I'm very impressed of how that game actually plays out to be on the Switch version. Sure, it does have some flaws for sure, specifically with the 30 frames per second as opposed to 60 frames per second, and on top of that, certain in-game dialogue has been replaced to make it a little bit more family friendly as opposed to the forms of some adult humor here and there. Well, it's hard for me to explain about that, but currently, as of right now, I'm currently on to the first chapter already, for the sake of the forms of the Switch remake of The Thousand Year Door. So, yeah, let me know in the comments down below for the question of the day. What was your first impressions for able to try out Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door Switch Remake? Because I would like to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. Because sure enough though, it's about the fact that I'm just very happy about the fact that the Switch Remake is now a thing. And I suppose no matter what though, as for right now, technically we've already got 2 more Mario games to be released for the Nintendo Switch, if God knows about the fact that they might bring us more for the sake of the forms of the upcoming Nintendo Direct, for the sake of the forms of in June, assuming of course about the fact that it could be either be general or well, let's just not bring ourselves with the partner showcase or anything else like that, because let me tell you, I am so sick of the forms of those partner showcases from now on, especially concerning for the fact that God knows if well, then again, we'll have to wait and see what happens until whenever we get to on June at some point. So anyway, and it's also worth noting for potentially speaking now is about the fact that, like I said before, we've only down to 2 Mario games left for now, for the Nintendo Switch anyway, and those are Luigi's Mansion 2 HD and Nintendo World Championships NES Edition, because obviously it includes Super Mario Bros., Donkey Kong, Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels, Super Mario Bros. 2, aka Super Mario USA in Japan, and of course, Super Mario Bros. 3, and much, much more. So because of that, though, I'm sure enough, though, is about the fact that we still have no idea of what specific, media will go for the sake of the forms of Nintendo World Championships NES Edition, but I'm sure enough, though, is about the fact that we'll, mention more about it if we get onto at some point in either at the end of June or specifically in July. So even then though, time will tell, especially concerning for the fact that, like I said before, I'm currently playing through Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door Switch Remake recently, and like I mentioned about this before, that I'm currently on to Chapter 1 so far. So because of that though, hopefully though, I can able to play the game more often now, especially because obviously I can play the game on the go, because obviously the Nintendo Switch is the most uniquest Nintendo system of all time, and as also is doing really, really well. At least we've already know about that ever since during the forms have been a couple of days ago, especially thanks to the forms of both Mighty and Ray have already mentioned about this already. So either way, and also, as far as I might as well notice right from the start though, is about the fact that, for what I can tell, about the fact that we've only got about exactly 4 weeks left until specifically Luigi's Mansion 2 HD is going to be releasing on a Nintendo Switch. So because of that though, I'm sure enough though is about the fact that maybe we're able to actually hear about the forms of the overview trailer for the sake of the forms of Luigi's Mansion 2 HD just before the actual game comes out, for the sake of the forms of the actual specific editions they were able to add it in. Well, don't get your hopes up just yet though, because as far as I'm aware, obviously though is about the fact that we'll talk more about the forms of Luigi's Mansion 2 HD at some point in the future, for potentially if we're able to try to do a let's play of the game at long last after dealing with the forms of Luigi's Mansion 1 since in last year. So potentially speaking, I was about the fact that we are still very appreciated able to actually finally get a chance to able to do the entire trilogy of the Luigi's Mansion games in the future, because obviously though we've already done the first game already. Well, mind you, I'm probably not going to be focusing on the 3DS version, because obviously though it's about the fact that we still haven't got the 3DS capture card or anything else like that. Plus, what I've noticed is about the fact that the controls are a bit, well, uncomfortable for me on the 3DS version, because to me, the GameCube controller is the best controller of all time, next to the forms of the Nintendo Switch Pro controller. So because of that though, oh, and speaking of Nintendo Switch Pro controller actually, recently I've got myself a yet another Switch Pro controller with a standard black edition, because I almost first thought I was gonna able to save up for the sake of the forms of this very, very cool the Zelda Tears of the Kingdom controller, but of course that particular controller has been out of stock, so because of that though, I don't think it's possible for me to able to actually get that controller for the sake of time. Plus it's generally because no matter what though, such controllers are going to get a lot more expensive, specifically with the special edition variants. And not to mention though, I've heard from eBay, as far as I'm concerned, that basically though, they now start able to actually bring up the bootleg fake counterparts for the sake of the forms of the actual Switch Pro controller. So that's the reason why I tend to able to ignore eBay for now on in terms of the forms of the actual Nintendo Switch Pro controllers for the sake of time. So anyway, speaking of which though, is about the fact that I've also noticed something about this as well, that I totally forgot to mention about during the forms of in about a couple of days ago actually, that I've already mentioned about the fact that yes indeed, that Zelda Tears of the Kingdom soundtrack has been unrevealed, and it obviously includes 344 tracks for likely 9 CDs all in one. But as it turns out, there's also yet another accessory you do get for specifically the Master Sword USB, which actually is likely a displayable that actually includes a stand. The USB boosts 15 high-resolution sound sources from an enhanced audio experience, at least as far as I've heard about that. And for what I've looked at it, it's actually quite cool for that particular little, the actual Master Sword is being attached to the forms of the actual stand as far as I'm aware. So either way, once again, to infinity and beyond, so just in case we can able to actually take care of the forms of some more a whole pack of robots, or specifically UFOs, and also some alien-like stuff like that. So anyway, there's also another thing I want to point out as well, is that technically, is that during the forms have been, I would say by the beginning of 2020 actually, that basically that was about the fact that, I've already mentioned about this earlier, that recently that was about the fact that Inside Out 2 has already managed able to begun its promotion for the sake of the forms of the McDonald's Happy Meal. Well, actually, as it turns out, that was technically the 6th time for the sake of the forms of certain Pixar movies did somehow manage able to have a collaboration with McDonald's Happy Meal. So because of that though, because the other ones goes to Onward, Soul, Luca, Lightyear, Elemental, and now Inside Out 2. So I've honestly have no idea why that Disney and Pixar decided able to actually go onto the forms of McDonald's Happy Meal routine. So no matter what though, I did manage able to look upon the past few compilations for the sake of the forms of the old school commercials back in so many years ago. Like for instance about the fact that Disney usually used to did a promotion for the sake of the forms of the McDonald's Happy Meal during that time, which I do know for a few of them actually, which one of them was actually Hercules, and the other one was Tarzan, so that was in, back in the 90s and stuff like that. And also there are some rare occasions where basically they did a McDonald's Happy Meal for the sake of the forms of Monsters Inc. back then, so yeah, that seems very, kind of strange while looking back on it though, especially concerning for the fact that, well, it's hard for me to say, because I know for a fact that it's been about 2 days ago since I actually have last played this game for sure, and not to mention though is about the fact that during at some point on this Friday coming up, that basically I've heard that Sonic will definitely finish up everything for the sake of the forms of Sonic Rush. So because of that though, yeah, things gets a little bit more exciting for the sake of convenience, that is. So either way, that's pretty much all we can able to think about in terms of the forms of Act 1 for the sake of the forms of Mighty Peach play. And now we're going back onto Cowgirl at Dusk, so just to ensure for the fact that we can able to find some more ninja people again. So hopefully though that the actual specific progression won't be that much of an issue, I don't think. So because of that though, and in fact no matter what though, I'm pretty sure one of those ninjas is actually nearby, especially after seeing that particular little cinematic scene where basically the actual train just somehow got away. So yeah, and thankfully though we don't have to worry about auto sequence for the getting on the horse and stuff like that. So either way, there's also another thing I want to point out as well, is that recently we've actually got ourselves some new information that's been happened for the sake of the forms of Dragon Ball Sparking Zero coming up. And the reason why I'm saying this is because what I've heard that in addition about the fact that they're able to actually bring fusions, just like the forms of how it does it in Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 1, as well as Tenkaichi 2 and 3, and technically speaking with the forms of Budokai 2 and Budokai 3, I'm pretty sure anyway. And no matter what though, is about the fact that I'm pretty excited to be able to actually know that the fusion transformations will make a massive comeback. And in addition to that, they've shown us some more playable characters, and also there's one specific feature that I'm very glad that that particular battle mode will make its grand return after the events of not only Budokai Tenkaichi 2 as well as Budokai Tenkaichi 3, and yes, ladies and gentlemen, is that the team battle, specifically 5 versus 5 mode, has finally made a massive comeback after the events of Budokai Tenkaichi 3. And I'm gonna say, I was very excited about this, because every time whenever I managed to go back onto not only Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 2, alongside with Budokai Tenkaichi 3 every once in a while, sometimes I just loved able to actually play through the forms of team battle every once in a while. Not only because it was quite intense, but it's also about the fact that I can able to take control of not only 1, but 5 different playable characters in one team. So yeah, I'm very excited about the fact that that particular feature will make its return in Sparking Zero, which that makes me super duper smile, especially concerning for the fact that I'm just really looking forward to able to actually just to play that game with 5 versus 5 again. So yeah, it does well, feels a lot more exciting to me though. So, yeah, and we still have no idea when that game is going to be releasing just yet though, because as far as I can tell, they basically still mention about the forms of wishlist now. So obviously though, we're going on to the forms of the exact same territory as the forms of in Kingdom Hearts 3, back in the day that is, since in roughly about 10 years ago. So because of that though, yeah, we're still able to wait and see what happens. And not to mention though, is about the fact that, from what I've heard anyway, that recently we actually got ourselves some new information has been found for the sake of the forms of the Summer Game Fest. Although, I'll explain more about that in a moment, because the next thing I wanted to discuss upon, and that's what appears to be about the fact that recently, Sega has just been revealed yet another new trailer for the sake of the forms of Super Monkey Ball Banana Rumble, except this time what appears to be focused on characters and customization, similar to the forms of how it does it in Super Monkey Ball Banana Mania. So no matter what though, is about the fact that it just shows us what certain playable characters you're going to be playing as, specifically 7 playable characters at the very least, and in addition to that, with the forms of some customization options, so you can able to actually dress up as different clothings for specific characters, and you name the rest, which if you remember playing through Super Monkey Ball Banana Mania before, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I first thought it was going to be likely showcase the forms of certain DLC playable characters, but maybe it's a bit too early to decide for this point just yet. But hopefully during at some point, and probably at some point for the sake of by the end of June, maybe they're able to mention about the forms of the entire DLC, but we shall wait and see what happens. So either way, and no matter what though, also if I've noticed something about this, is that recently if I've heard that Fallout is going to be the next franchise is going to be coming to Fortnite. So yeah, it looks like at this point in onwards is that Fortnite is about to be getting a lot of collaboration. So because of that though, yeah, that's all I can really say about that, I guess. And there's also another thing I want to point out as well, that potentially speaking of, is about the fact that for those of you probably wondering, that there's that one specific game that I honestly forgot to mention about, in regards to the forms of something anniversary related, and that game in questioning is Kirby Triple Deluxe for the Nintendo 3DS. And yes, for what the reason why I'm somehow pointing things out is because no matter what though, that game has been out for 10 years now, since in 2014. So yeah, that seems kind of legitimate, especially considering for the fact that I do remember playing the game, despite the fact I had to wait until 5 months later, during at some point in October 2014, to go alongside with the forms of able to actually get ourselves not only the PlayStation 3 version of not only Sega, Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing, but also with Sonic Generations, and on top of that, The Legend of Zelda A Link Between Worlds, and on top of that with Super Smash Bros. For the Nintendo 3DS, and of course Rio 2 for the DVD, and of course the forms of Kirby Triple Deluxe here and there. And while looking back on it though, it's actually really dang good, even on the first ever 3DS Kirby game to be released on. Even though despite the fact I still haven't exactly fully 100% everything in that game yet though, because what I can tell about the fact that the True Arena is going to be pretty tough, just like the forms of how it does it on the previous Kirby games. They somehow include the True Arena, but hopefully I might get back into that game at some point though. Well, it's difficult to tell, because at this point in time, it looks like my Nintendo Switch is going to be my top priority when it comes to playing video games every once in a while. Especially because, like I said before, I can now finally able to actually play Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door on a go, without need to worry about the forms of, well, despite the fact I do need to still bring my charger with me, so just in case I can able to, well, charge my Nintendo Switch, so just in case I don't want to able to lose my progression. Although thankfully though, just like the forms of how it does it in, let's just say, Paper Mario Color Splash, alongside with the forms of Paper Mario The Origami King, that basically though, the game will autosave. So, at least if I was assuming so anyway. So, anyway, so that pretty much does it for the sake of the forms of Cowgirl at Dusk. And now we're going back on to Welcome to the Spooky Party. Now, as far as I do recall, that there was that one specific collectible I did somehow miss in this particular play, and that's what appears to be the ribbon, as far as I did somehow found out. And because of that though, I didn't pay attention to the forms of the surroundings all that much. Plus, it's clearly because about the fact I just wasn't able to actually rush this for the sake of the forms of trying to get certain progression in terms of the forms of certain plays. So, yeah, nothing else I can really say about that. So, and as far as I'm aware, is about the fact that I believe that when it comes to the forms of Kirby Triple Deluxe in mind, that basically does about the fact that that game did somehow introduce into ourselves 2 sub-games which will become stable for certain expansion games for only for Nintendo eShop application. So no matter what though, and those 2 games are in questioning are Kirby Fighters and DDD's Drum Dash. So because of that though, which later on, it became a deluxe counterpart during the forms of it later on in 2014 respectively for the sake of the forms of the Nintendo eShop on the 3DS. Even though it's a shame about the fact that you can no longer able to actually buy not only Kirby Fighters Deluxe, but also with DDD's Drum Dash Deluxe as well for the Nintendo eShop now, because obviously though the eShop applications for not only for the 3DS, but also for the Wii U is pretty much dead since a year ago. So because of that though, yeah, it's kind of sucks honestly, because I will admit though, I actually really enjoyed those particular 2 sub-games in particular for the sake of the forms of Kirby Fighters Deluxe, in addition to the forms of DDD's Drum Dash Deluxe, despite the fact I'm pretty much useless when it comes to able to try to do some perfect rhythm games, because I was trying to unlock the true final stage, which appears to be the extra stage, but actually as it turns out my rhythm timing is way too off. So because of that though, I was literally trying my best, but even then no, it's just about the fact that every time whenever I play rhythm themed games, specifically one of those examples which appears to be Rhythm Paradise for the DS as far as I can recall, that I do remember trying that game out back in the day, and I'm pretty much suck at rhythm games. So because of that though, the only point I've actually got into, as far as I do remember correctly, that's what appears to be the 2nd stage and the 3rd stage. And I believe the 3rd stage is the one I'm stuck on the most, but that's just mainly because my rhythm skills is pretty much useless all things considered. So because of that though, that's just me. So either way, and as far as I can recall, about the fact that when it comes to the forms of some other topics worth noting for, is that recently Splatfest number 16 has got itself as the actual results ever since in Journey Forms of on Monday, and actually as it turns out that the winner for the sake of the forms of that particular result for Splatfest number 16 for specifically in Splatoon 3, and that's what appears to be by the forms of Team Bucket List, which as a result, yeah, I was not expecting that particular team did somehow win, all things considered. So, and I believe something tells me though is about the fact that if I see that little shiny bit onto the right, then obviously though that's the thing I was being on about. So because of that though, yeah, we have to rescue this guy around while trying to able to deliver the forms of some delicious cookies to the forms of, you know, these guys right here. And as a result, now we can able to actually receive the next ribbon for Stella. So that should be all good to go. But anyway, because yeah, I was very surprised about the fact that Team Bucket List did somehow receive more points for the actual final results. And compared to the forms of how it does with the other 2, which there are Team Same Ol and also Team Save the Day, that Team Save the Day did somehow receive 60 points, which is much lower, whilst meanwhile for the sake of the forms of Team Same Ol, that was awfully quite close in between both Team Same Ol and Team Bucket List, because as far as I'm aware, Team Bucket List did somehow receive 415 points, and then Team Same Ol did somehow manage to receive 395 points. So yeah, again, it's awfully close for the sake of the forms of the actual points capacity for that particular final result in mind. So yeah, that's sure it's something. So oh, there's also another anniversary thing that just happened, which in terms of the forms of what specific film I was on about, well, The Return of Jafar has recently became 30 years old just recently. And relatively speaking, basically is one of the first ever direct-to-VHS Disney movie that has ever existed since in 1994, and despite the fact that that particular film came out the exactly the same year as the legendary Disney animated films of all time, which appears to be The Lion King. And while looking back in Journey films of The Return of Jafar though, despite the fact that it was basically a sequel to the most well-acclaimed movie back in 1992, that's of course Aladdin. So no matter what though, The Return of Jafar, while looking back on it though, it's alright. I mean, it is kind of rough when it comes to animation nowadays, and on top of that, I feel like that the songs were pretty hilariously bad for the sake of the forms of how the fact that it's not only because of the lyrics, but it's also about the fact that I don't usually listen to the actual songs more often, because obviously though, compared to the original Aladdin though, that's the most iconic, and stay plus with the forms of Beauty and the Beast, and of course The Lion King. So because of that though, but when it comes to certain other songs, in addition to the forms of Hercules as well, and of course Tarzan for the sake of the forms of Phil Collins, and of course Mulan as well, because still, no matter what though, Disney Renaissance is the best era for the sake of the forms of the Disney film companies. Not to mention though, with The Little Mermaid as well. Well, I will admit though right away, I honestly do forget about the forms of the Pocahontas songs. I will admit it though right away, because that film to me though just feels a bit kind of bleak to me. Well, nothing bad per se, but it's just about the fact I don't usually watch Pocahontas that much, because I will admit it though, that film is pretty underwhelming to me compared to the forms of how it does it for the sake of the forms of any other films came out during the forms of in the Renaissance era. For, as I mentioned this before, The Lion King, Hercules, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and etc, etc, which you know exactly what I'm talking about. So, but either way, and yeah, as I mentioned this before, is about the fact that when it comes to The Return of Jafar, or in some cases Aladdin 2, it was alright. Like I said before, after 30 years since when it first came out, despite the fact that the actual animation was actually in a low budget, concerning for the fact that obviously that film was based off for the sake of the films of the pilots of the TV series, which later became true, for the sake of the films of Aladdin, the TV series. So because of that though, because you can definitely see the resemblance of that particular animation budget. So because of that though, and also if I can tell about the fact it's kind of weird that the exact same voice actor who did Homer Simpson from The Simpsons, that did somehow voice the genie in the forms of it not only The Return of Jafar, but also with the forms of the Aladdin TV series, and eventually at some point for certain video games as well. For, let's just say, Kingdom Hearts 1, Kingdom Hearts 2, and onwards, as far as I'm aware. So, relatively speaking, that's as far as I can try and able to actually explain all that stuff. So, either way. So yeah, that basically takes care of the forms of, well, welcome to the spooky party. And now we're about to be moving on onto Melody of the Sea. So, anyway, because unlike the forms of how it does it for yet another Aladdin sequel, but taking place in during the forms of the actual release year for 1996, so as a result, that particular film I was on about called Aladdin and the King of Thieves, where basically though Robin Williams did somehow once again voice the genie ever since in the forms of the original Aladdin film. So because of that though, yeah, it seems kind of weird back in the day, that is. So either way though, and there's also another thing I want to point out as well, is that potentially speaking of, what I've heard anyway, is that GTA 6, or Grand Theft Auto 6, was expected able to be releasing at some point in next year's fall, specifically fall 2025, so it could either be on September, October, or November. It's hard to tell because we're still on 2024 right now, so who knows, maybe we'll find out more details about that during at some point in the Summer Game Fest, or specifically the upcoming video game events for the sake of the forms of the actual presentations alike. So anyway, and speaking of something related to Aladdin kind of vibes to it, as far as I'm aware, it's about the fact that until tomorrow anyway, that the live-action counterpart of Disney's Aladdin is going to be celebrating its 5th anniversary at some point in during the film's event tomorrow, which I'm sure that will let both Mighty and Ray will both mention more about that if they go back onto Super Mario Band for able to actually conclude the rest of the forms of the Yoshi Challenge, basically, as far as I can definitely recall that. So anyway, and also what I've noticed is about the fact that someone actually did say about the fact that at some point that Danny DeVito, you know, with the voice who did Phil for the sake of Hercules and all that stuff, well, he did say about the fact that Danny DeVito says he would play Wario in a Super Mario Bros. Movie sequel. Well, it's a bit hard to tell at this point, because despite the fact that the sequel of the Super Mario Bros. Movie is still currently in development, so hopefully shall see what happens during at some point in possibly in 2025, or potentially speaking of, able to mark the 40th anniversary of the Super Mario Bros. Franchise at some point, for the sake of the falls of next year, that is. So, anyway though, there's also another thing that's worth noting for, is that I've recently looked upon something, thanks to the films of Mason Parkinson YouTube channel, and he did somehow manage to discover there was actually a new icon for Sonic Cross Shadow Generations, and I'm gonna say, it does look pretty cool though, especially it kind of reminds me of the forms of the original box art, or specifically the forms of the original front cover for the original Sonic Generations, specifically for the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and PC, except on the 3DS, because the 3DS version does have a different cover, but that's besides the point. But also this time around though, they somehow include Shadow on the center of the image. So because of that though, I'm sure enough though it could be a possibility that could be related to the actual box art for the sake of the forms of Sonic Cross Shadow Generations. You know, similar to the ones how we've got for the sake of the forms of the original Sonic Colors with Sonic Colors Ultimate, except the fact that with a different background, and on top of that, a new Jade Ghost Wisp has somehow exists. And on top of all that stuff though, with the forms of, well, you probably get the idea what I was expecting to talk about. So, anyway though, in terms of something else I could possibly explain about, as I mentioned this before, about the fact that, well, the Summer Game Fest has actually received themselves more than 55 partners has been confirmed for the sake of the upcoming Summer Game Fest in 2024, and they did somehow list it for a grand total of 55 partners, as I mentioned this before, and some of those developers they somehow include, which there are 2K, Amazon Games, and also Capcom, and as well as Amazing Season Games, I'm pretty sure, and there's also Day of the Devs, and there's also the forms of Atari, Bandai Namco, and as well as the forms of EA or Electronic Arts, and there's also Discord, and there's also FunCon, and Focus Entertainment, Epic Games, and there's also the forms of Riot Games, S-Game, PlayStation, Xbox, like let's just say Ubisoft, and Sega is going to be included, and there's also WB Games, and there's also going to be SNK, Steam, and Netflix Games, and much more. So I'm still very curious to know of what specific announcements they'll bring for the sake of the forms of the Summer Game Fest. Although mind you about the fact that Nintendo was not included for the sake of the forms of the Summer Game Fest, but that's okay, because as far as we can able to predict that before, maybe at some point they were able to actually bring a Nintendo Direct at some point in next month, which that'll be true, mind you. So hopefully that we shall see what happens during at some point whenever we get around to it. So anyway, there's also another thing I want to point out as well, is that recently what I've also noticed is that one of those films in particular is going to be coming out at some point in 2025, and that film in questioning is Five Nights at Freddy's 2 is going to be on the cinemas until December 5th in 2025, so that's going to be roughly the exactly same month as in not only Avatar 3, but also with the forms of the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, or specifically the SpongeBob movie 4, or if I like to call it though, for the sake of the actual specific knowledge, the SpongeBob movie Search for SquarePants, basically. So because of that though, I bet that next year is going to be a massive competition between the forms of three of those films in particular, for the sake of the forms of by the end of 2025 for sure. But then again though, we'll talk more about the forms of 2025 during at some point by the end of 2024 basically, aside from able to celebrate, you know, I mean, the 40th anniversary of the Super Mario Bros. Franchise, and as a result, that's going to be a big main event as far as this is concerned. And, in addition to that, though, just anything else I could probably explain about more, but as a result, that's as far as I can try and able to explain about the forms of today's topic. Well, apart from the fact that there was technically one last thing I want to mention about, and that's what appears to be about the fact that, yes, indeed, specifically in Radio City Music Hall, that basically one of those films in particular has also celebrating its anniversary treatment as well, except this time what appears to be Harry Potter and the Prisoner of the Azkaban. So we'll talk more about that at some point by the end of this month, specifically in Journey Films within the 31st of May, basically. So even then though, let's just see what... so that's where it is. Okay. I totally missed that particular Sparkle Gem at first, so because no matter what though, again, whenever I first got to this play, basically though, sometimes I always ended up missing quite a few Sparkle Gems every once in a while, plus it's mainly because of my first ever experience for the sake of the forms of certain plays actually plays out to be, as well as the controls needs to be in a learning curve, and you pretty much name the rest of it, so anyways, we'll bring out the turtle out of here, so we can able to actually do, once again, do a singing rehearsal bit at the end, so... But, yeah, and I suppose there's technically one final thing I want to mention about this as well. Yes, indeed, I did somehow manage to able to order not only one, but two final PlayStation 3 games I've decided able to get from my collection, and those two games are Dragon Ball Z Burst Limit, and finally Soul Calibur 4, because the reason why I've somehow choose the PlayStation 3 counterparts of not only Soul Calibur 4, but as well as Dragon Ball Z's Burst Limit, basically though is about the fact that, well, first of all, those two games does not support any trophies, just like the forms of how it does it in Sonic 06 and Sega Superstars Tennis, and in addition to that, I feel like they're trying to play with the D-pad control pad for the sake of the PlayStation 3 controller when it comes to 2D fighting games might be a best option for me, because while trying to play through the game with the M-Lock stick just feels a bit kind of awkward sometimes. And in addition to that though, is about the fact that recently what I've also noticed is that I've somehow managed to finally get a chance to able to buy Soul Calibur 2 on the GameCube version again, so that way I can able to actually give that game another chance, especially because concerning for the fact that that is without doubt is the best Soul Calibur game of all time, and not to mention though because I somehow still got the GameCube version because of Link from The Legend of Zelda was actually the guest character, although I was originally trying to able to get myself not only the PlayStation 2 version, but also with the forms of the Xbox version as well. But I will admit that right away is about the fact that I think one version is quite enough for me when it comes to the forms of certain franchises I did somehow enjoy the most. Well, usually relatively speaking though, is about the fact that unlike Sonic the Hedgehog, alongside with Mario, and maybe a little bit of Pac-Man, that every once in a while though, I can't really help it for myself, just to able to actually get myself multiple versions of the exact same games, but with different controls, and on top of that, certain differences when it comes to graphics, and you name the rest. So, but that's just me. So, yeah, there we go, folks. That pretty much does it for almost everything for the sake of the forms of Floor 3, aside from the fact that, as I mentioned this before, we'll save the boss challenges for later. So, yeah, that's as far as I can try to talk about the forms of today's discussion at this point, guys. I mean, sure enough, though, is about the fact that, again, we'll save the actual other topics and during at some point for probably for the better for the sake of the forms of both Mighty and Ray, but that's besides the point. So, either way, so yeah, let's go back onto the first floor here, so just in case we can able to actually just to buy some more furnitures and what have you, except in Journey Forms within Floor 3, because obviously that was about the fact that we can now buy some more stuff, thanks to the forms of those Sparkle Gems. So, yeah, that's to be expected. So, But yeah, it's kind of unfortunate for the sake of the forms of... I would have loved to able to actually play through everything for the sake of the forms of Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door on my spare own time. But every once in a while, that was about the fact I still need to come back onto Princess Peach Showtime from time to time, just in case for certain progression. And on top of all that stuff, though, I just want to go for a true 100% completion just before I definitely gonna go back onto Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door for sure. So, either way, yeah, nothing else I could really say about that, I guess. I felt incredibly bad for the sake of the forms of the American version of the game, sadly, because as far as I can tell, that back in June forms have been a couple of days ago, that the actual Nintendo company decided able to cancel pre-orders for the sake of the forms of the US version of Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door Switch Remake, not only for the sake of the forms of Walmart, but also with Amazon as well, which I'm not exactly sure why that's the case. I think it's probably because of, I don't know, out-of-print copies or something? Well, it's pretty tricky to say, because I know for a fact that, well, luckily I still managed to receive the game, luckily, for the UK countries. So, thankfully for UK countries and European countries, have never come across that issue, thankfully. So, either way, though, yeah, it's kind of unfortunate for the American players that does not seem able to actually get the game physically, though, during the forms of that particular pre-order crisis at the moment when it comes to two shops in particular for Walmart and Amazon respectively. So, but there you go, folks. That pretty much does it for floor 3. And as I said, we'll save the boss challenges for later. So with that, we're now moving on to floor 4. So we've almost done with the hide and seek challenge, basically, guys. So yeah, join me next time for more of Let's Play of Princess Peach Showtime. Not what appears to be about the fact that we are still continue doing the forms of hide and seek challenges, except this time we're going on to floor 4. So this will be interesting. So I'll see you guys until next Tuesday. Later, fellas.